So I'm back playing with the 659. Just going to dress the timing side up. I still haven't decided what I'm going to do with the clutch. I'm going to make this a dry clutch with a cable operated mechanism that sits out here, sort of where the cover is, and it's all going to be open. But that will present a problem getting the bike roadworthy when it's finally all back together, because you can't have an open clutch for a roadworthy certificate. So I may need to put the original style clutch back in, which is wet clutch, cover and slave cylinder on the left hand side. But the primary drive gear that goes on here depends on whether it's wet clutch or dry clutch. So I haven't worked that out yet, so I'm going to leave that. I might just slam the wet clutch cover on for the moment just to cover it all up, stop anything getting in, because it's almost complete. What I'm going to do today is put the timing shaft back together, put the belts on, do the cam timing, and see how far I get. The first thing I'm going to do is put the timing shaft seal in, just this seal here. So I'll just spin the engine over until the keyway's at the top. With the keyway at the top, it's easy to put a bit of tape on top of it to protect the seal as it goes on. You can get special seal runners for these, but a piece of tape just protects it quite nicely. I put some HHS 2000 inside the seal. The outside of the seal I wiped down with some brake clean. I used to put some 3-bond on the outside of the seal, but I had one once, a Panther, that I was sort of doing. Didn't have time to let the 3-bond go off. By 3-bond I mean the grey 1215 3-bond silicone sealant, and the seal kept popping out. And since then I've sort of decided to not bother putting 3-bond on the seal, but if it's going to sit there and the 3-bond can go off before the engine gets used, which this one certainly will, then you could still do it if you like. It's a bit of lube that helps the seal go in nicely. It's up to you. So with the tape on the shaft, slide the seal over. Down to the bottom, there's a lip at the bottom that the seal goes up onto, the sealing edge. And to fit the seal, I use a tool. This is original Panther tool, I think, but for some reason it doesn't go all the way on the later engines. I'm not really sure why now. So I have this that I made up quite some time ago. It's got a raised ridge there which pushes the seal in, and that hits the case to stop the seal runner moving, and just installs the seal where you want it. So that's seal in. The next thing that goes on is this circlip that sits in the groove down here on the shaft. And this is what the backing washer sits up against. The clip goes into the recess on the back of the backing washer. This ring is what you tighten everything up against. So it needs to be in good condition and held nicely in the groove and in the backing washer. So I always use new ones. They're quite hard to get off. You can get them off if you need to get it off without damaging it, you can, but it's quite an infuriating process. So I usually just destroy them to get them off, and out they come. Getting them back on again can also be quite tricky. Sometimes you just sort of work it on around. This might work, or you can get some expanding pliers. Oops. My engine's not bolted down today. I'll get the expanding pliers and try that. Some expanding pliers, Yeah. The problem with that is that the ends of the clip aren't actually square. So it's quite hard. There we go. To get it on. There you go. Oh, come on. Yep. I might need to bolt the engine down. It keeps moving. Although I'm going to be turning it around, so. Into the groove. So make sure it's nicely in the groove. You can see it moves around, but it's in the groove without being terribly expanded. And then this backing washer goes on next with the recess to the back. And you can usually sort of feel it snap over the ring when it goes into position. There we go. Next we have our two keys. The keys you can see you might be able to see, have a fine line there where it's been hit with something, just to peen the edge out a bit and hold them into place. So you might need to squeeze them into place with some multi-grips. Multi-grips. Some people call these channel locks. Okay, so they're both in. Pulleys, this was the inner pulley. Okay. The central plate, which does just float. And then the outer pulley. You can tell which one's the outer one usually because it will have had some paint on it to signify the top dead center mark. That one on. Now because you can see a little bit of shaft here before the thread, whereas some of the engines there's no shaft protruding, it's just thread, and you just put a washer on. These ones have this bush that goes on, which has a larger ID to go over the shaft, and then a reduced section for the thread, and that's what holds that on. And then I'm wondering if there should be a washer as well. I'm guessing there's not. If there was, I would have had it in my stuff. So once again, I'm reusing an old nut with some Loctite. I would Loctite these always. And if it was a customer engine, I would use a new nut. But it's mine. Spin on. Being a 20-tooth pulley, I don't have an actual holding tool for this. The 18-tooth pulley tool will fit in one position. So I'll try using it to hold this in place. See how we go. I haven't actually seen a holding tool for these 20-tooth timing shaft pulleys to know what it's actually meant to look like. We'll torque this up to about 72 Newton meters. In there. That in there. Didn't really feel that tight. That's it. 72. So that's the timing shaft on. When I first had this engine apart, I did some videos on cam timing and stuff, and the bearings on the belt adjusters and the belt idlers just felt a bit funny. I sell a lot of these on the 696 1100 Monster series. It's quite common to see this one in particular's fixed tensioner C's solid at 24 or 36,000 Ks. So if they feel a bit funny, I just replace them. These fixed ones have a fine M8 thread, so the torque spec's a little bit lower than a normal M8. It's only 20 Newton meters. So they're in and torqued. Now the tensioners, I just use the typical Loctite silver anti-seize paste on them. I don't Loctite these in, as some people like to. Leave them loose. Good. So I've got an engine turning tool in the other side, which we'll spin around in a minute to see that. But to put the belts on, I might need a clutch cover just so we've got the slot. Well, we probably don't need the slot, I can work it out. Horizontal top dead center is about there. I'll put a long skinny screwdriver in the spark plug hole. Confirm it's just about there. On these 659, 696, 796 engines, there's no marks on the belt surrounds as to where you line up your dots with for the camshafts. There's a mark on the timing shaft, or the primary drive cover here for the timing shaft dot, but there's nothing on the cams themselves. So if you pull the belts off and don't pay attention, you end up with a situation where you don't have a reference. So what I've done, and in one of my other videos I showed this, what I'm going to do is just use a quick method that usually works, and we'll see how it goes when I check the cam timing. That's horizontal top dead center, but I actually need vertical first because the vertical belt goes on first. Oh, I can do this one. No, that'll go on just fine. So just putting the belts on, with this engine at horizontal top dead center firing, what I'm going to do is the camshafts I'm going to rotate clockwise, which is reverse to what they usually rotate anti-clockwise. I'm going to go clockwise until it stops, and you can see the inlet valve just starting to open there. So that's in reality that's inlet valve closing and then the base circle of the cam. So I'm going to turn it back till it just hits that. I'm going to pick the belt up and it's about there. So I'm going to go 1, 2, nearly 3 teeth around and see if that's about right. I think I did this earlier on with this engine and it was about right. But usually 2.5 to 3 teeth from inlet valve closing is top dead center firing for that cylinder. So this is horizontal top dead center firing. I'm going to rotate the engine around now to the dot is up here, which is vertical top dead center firing. I'll do the same thing to put that belt on, and then we'll see how close it is when I check the cam timing. Now, spin it around gently to here. Screwdriver in the hole. It's about there. And so we turn the cam clockwise until it stops, which is inlet. You can see the inlet valve just starting to move there. So that's it. Now you always put the belts on from the drive side or the fixed tensioner side. So they always go on this side of the pulley first on any of the engines, and you start with the twin cam engine, 4 valve, you start with this cam here, then you go to this cam. And that's because that's the tight side of the belt. If you put it on this side first and you make this side tight, when you go to tension it, it will roll the cam back maybe a tooth or so. So you always start on the drive side of the belt or the counterclockwise side. So that's stopped. It's going to go on about there. So I'll go 1, 2, 3. And that's 3 teeth rotated from inlet valve closing. And we'll see how that goes. Now the thing to do now is just turn it over gently to see if the pistons are going to hit the valves in case you got it wrong. When this dot is down here, that's horizontal top dead center firing. So when the dot is up here, it's horizontal top dead center overlap. And that's when the valves are getting opened into the piston. So it's either going to stop there on this cylinder, or this is vertical top dead center firing. So vertical top dead center overlap will be over here. And that's when the vertical valves will be hitting the piston. So I turn it over slowly and just see if it stops about here. Didn't, it's nice. Turn it over to, and it might stop about here somewhere. No, and all the way around. So that's back to horizontal top dead center firing. It turns over, so it can't be too bad. What I'll do is set the degree wheel up, put the dial gauges on it, spin it over and see where it is. We might even loosen these off and just move the cam around and see how much variation there is in timing, because these pulleys generally have a lot of variation. It's a 20-tooth pulley, so each tooth is 18 camshaft degrees or 36 crankshaft degrees. The other way to set the camshafts up on this is to use all the locking tools, and that's a more definitive way, if you have the locking tools, to know where the camshafts need to be. And I'm pretty sure last time I did this engine with the locking tools, the cams were at about 108 degrees, which is nice. That's where I usually set them. I think the spec is about 109 on the inlet. I forget now, 110 maybe. But I use 108 for these engines. So now that I know that we can spin it without piston sittings valves, I might put a bit of lube in the heads, just a bit of oil in the heads, and then we'll turn it over, set the belt tensions, and then we can do the cam timing. You can't get as much oil into the vertical exhaust stuff as you can into the inlet exhaust because that's down the bottom, but it still gets some inner oil in there. So I'll turn it over a few times to let the belts settle. Because when you put the belts on, they aren't going to be where they're going to run immediately. So I just turn them over quite a lot of times just to get things settled to where they're going to sit. Sometimes these DS style engines, you'll see the belt look like it's running off the edge of the pulley a bit. That's just really common. I wouldn't be overly concerned about that at all. Okay, so we'll go to horizontal. When I start doing the tension on these, the first thing I do is just loosen them off, pull them up till the free play's out, and tighten it there. That's usually fairly close to where you're going to end up. Vertical top dead center firing. When you go to top dead center firing for each cylinder, so that way there's no load on the camshaft because both valves are closed. If you do it when the camshaft has the valves open, there is a load on the cam. And so that load on the camshaft will impact the belt tension. So if you do each cylinder at top dead center firing, then you know there's no load on the belts. And again, just push the tensioner in till the free play goes away. And that's where I like to start. For the tension, 2 apps. There's one called Easy Tension, which gives you a number as such. And the other one is N-Track Tuner, which is a guitar tuning app. It just gives you a range. If we go to that side, 100 Hertz is down here. And that's what you want to see the peak at when you pluck the belt. So you need silence to use this app, realistically. Whereas the Easy Tension is actually a belt tensioning app. So it's a bit more durable in terms of it not being disturbed by outside influence or noise, that sort of thing. It's really quiet here today. So N-Track Tuner is fine, but sometimes you get industrial noise from places around you. Even just a hum from an industrial setting around you can influence the N-Track Tuner. So top dead center horizontal firing. Oops, it wants to be restarted. Sometimes Easy Tension doesn't want to work and you just need to restart it. Using frequency measurement. I just hook my fingernail on the edge of the belt. Oops, got 126 Hertz. .94. That's not too bad for a first try. I check the tension several times, just turning the engine over back to the same spot, check it again, check it again, check it again, just to see what variation you get. Sometimes you might go, first time's 94, you might all get between 95 and 100, which would be fine, but you might get 94, then 110, and sometimes they get quite variant. I often tend to do one belt at a time, just to .89. So it's probably a little bit on the loose side. I like to see 100 or around 100. When you're adjusting these, because you're just pushing it in a slot, the actual variation is quite fine. So you might just squeeze it a little bit and it'll be too much. It's quite annoying, whereas the 4 valves with the eccentrics and the tools means it's much easier to just change it a little bit. Let's check it again. 99, but if I've adjusted it, I don't believe that number until I've turned it over and seen it again. Do it again. Now it's just giving me a 36 without doing anything. And sometimes it does that, I don't really know why. But if it does that, maybe restart it, come in again. Hertz. $106 that time. And back to 38. I'm not sure why it does that. $37. For some reason it's got the SAD, so I might just restart the app. That's the thing with the easy tension, and the tension app, sometimes they'll pick up something else, whereas with the N-Track tuner, which is just a guitar tuning app, it's really basic, but it's also much less likely to be influenced by anything external. Try it again. $105. $110. I tend to like 100 Hertz on these ones because they can get a bit noisy when they get hot. Saying 105, so I might back this one off just a little bit. And the problem with this is that a little bit is very, very hard to judge, particularly when you nip this up, do it really gently, because even the act of undoing it, when I tried to undo that, then I could feel the tension move. Now it's showing low 90s. 94. But as always, turn it over before you go really believing it. $98. If I see a few in the high 90s, I'll be happy. Not getting anything. Stop. Start again. $91. To go a little bit more. It can get quite infuriating and very back and forward. 94. Sometimes I give up on easy tension and go back to N-track tuner because it's just much more durable. 102. Yeah, 36. Rubbish. Yep. It's gone back to the 35 again. Kill it, reopen the app. Not sure why it does that. It hasn't done that for some time. Get the camera out and things tend to stop working. Yes, give me 36. If I go to N-track tuner, I'm just looking at the peaks around here. In my experience, N-track tuner reads a little bit higher than easy tension. It's just sort of peaking up here. It's just over 100. So I'm probably happy with that as it is. This is much less convenient to try and show people. So that's about 100 Hertz. We'll try easy tension again. Oops. $101. So I'm happy with that one. So I'm going to torque that up. 25 Newton meters on these bolts. I always do the adjustable tensioner first rather than the fixed bolt. Sometimes doing the bolt that it pivots around first will actually move it. Then once I've done that, I would always check it again just in case it's moved to some extent. Oh, come on. Oops. You need to make sure that the microphone end is at the belts, and sometimes easy tension will flip as to which way is the end that is doing the visual recording. So I've been pointing it the wrong way. Goose. $97. Works much better when the phone's pointing the right direction. $101. Excellent. I'll do the vertical. Vertical top dead center firing, and the dot is pointing at the horizontal cam. $78. It's a bit loose. I often just back it off and go back to the sort of take all the free play out style. I don't really believe it's 76 hertz, but spin it over. Still saying 77. Oh, it is fairly loose. You can pull it off the fixed tensioner a fair bit. When people talk about using hex keys to set these, they talk about putting it in and just sliding it through. And you can sort of, that's the 6mm hex key, but it's a little bit loose. Probably tight for the 6mm hex key method, but a little bit loose in the tension. And sometimes, if the belt's a bit loose, it gets a bit wacky in terms of picking up a tension cleanly. $41. It's not 41. It's going to that rubbish again. $92. $96. $101. That's pretty good. $95. $89. I don't believe that. It was showing me just over 100. $100. $100. So that's pretty good. We'll call this one done as well. Put a little bit of a nip on that one. Turn him over again. See if it moved. 103. $29. It's being wacky today. I haven't had it be this strange for quite some time, actually. I don't know why it's doing that, but it does happen occasionally. But generally, if you know about where it is, and it's about the right tension, you know that just by feeling it, then if it's giving you wacky numbers, you just sort of ignore them. $41. It's not usually this frustrating. I don't really know what its problem is today. $100. So when you've been doing it a lot, you just get a feel for what's right and what's wrong. $103. So that's fine. Close the annoying app. So our belt tensions are set, and now I'm going to check the cam timing. So the first thing we need to do is set top dead center. This is top dead center vertical firing from memory. Yep, because the dot, that's where we left the dot from last time. So it will be about there. The tools that I'm use when I'm doing the cam timing, most of them are sort of homemade. This is my 2-valve lift gauge, which is a piece of bent up flat steel with a dial gauge holder I stole from something years ago. And the foot is a piece of coat hanger wire bent up. Coat hanger wire is really good. It's I have lots of things that are made from coat hanger wire. So this is the lift gauge. You can get a genuine lift gauge, which would be something like this. And it's from Ducati. It would be, you know, close to $1,000. It was quiet, now someone's doing burnouts. Yep, they've gone. When you're fitting a lift gauge, the thing you sort of need to be most aware of is that the shaft of the lift gauge, the dial indicator, is fairly parallel with the valve. Because if it's not, when the valve goes up and down, your foot might move across. And on this instance, the foot is just sitting on the top of the closing shim. If the foot doesn't sit in a fairly consistent position, that might influence your readings a little bit. But we'll just go around and see what happens. Yep, that seems fine. Zero it up. How much lift does it have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.1 millimeters. There you go. For the top dead center pointer, which I just fit to one of the alternator cover screws, let's get the screw out if I can. Lots of these screws have been zinc plated, and the last thing I want to do is start damaging my zinc plating. You get very precious about this sort of stuff sometimes. Because this cover has the bolt recessed off a flat edge, you need something that stands off a fair way. So I just have lots of spacers. I usually use like a T-hat bush to sit against the edge of my pointer. And sometimes I'll just use a piece of threaded rod instead of a bolt, because at least if you put a bit of threaded rod in, you're not restricted to having the right length bolt, because sometimes it gets quite annoying when you're trying to do this and you have to get it sitting off the case a certain amount. Flat washer. And as is the case with anything, it's just a case of setting it up so it works. As long as it's repeatable, it's fine. Repeatability is just the center of all this sort of stuff. If you're doing something and the way you're doing it is repeatable, then that's all you can ask for in a scientific sense. Get it to stand off the degree wheel a little bit. There we go. It's up. Okie doke. To find top dead center, I use this top dead center tool I've shown before. It is an old D-series spark plug with the center smashed out, 8mm thread tapped into it, 8mm bolt through it with a hole in the middle to let the compression out. It's just a really good tool. When you screw this in, you need to be aware of the fact that when the inlet valve comes down, and if you look in through the spark plug hole You see the valve starts to open now. It's top dead center. You can see the inlet valve. So if you can see the inlet valve, it's possibly going to open into this. So when you put this in the cylinder, put it in between TDC firing and TDC overlap. So this is coming up now to TDC firing. So we'll go, the valve's closed, not longer, indicator's not moving anymore. So we go past top dead center firing a bit. We'll screw this in and then it'll work between here and turning it around. But we know we're not going to open the inlet valve into the end of the pointer. As a general rule, the exhaust valves don't open that far. And because they're smaller, they just don't stick into the cylinder as far as the inlet valves do. So let's wind it back and see if it stops. It stopped. It's at 21. I usually aim for about 10 degrees either side of top dead center because you might get a bit of variation either way if you're a long way from top dead center. This one's going to stop at 22. So we're pretty close. So I'll wind it out a bit. The piston isn't moving a great deal at this point of time. The last few millimeters is over quite a few degrees. I like about 10 either side. 6, 8, and 7, then move about half a degree. You're not going to get much closer than half a degree. 7, 8, 7.5. It's about 7.5. Sometimes as you're, this is annoying me, as you wind it around, you might put a little bit of a dent in the piston. So I might move a tiny amount from time to time, but it's not damaging the piston at all. It can move a little bit. 8.5. It's 11. Okay. Call that about 9.5. That's the starter motor you can hear turning over. And turn it backwards, it drives the starter motor. I just turn it until it sort of just gently stops. It's about 9.5. As ever, working around the camera makes it a little bit harder for me to see things because I'm trying to let you see things too. Yep, we'll call that 9.5. So 9.5 both sides of the stop. We'll call that top dead center. Okay, and if we go back to there, that will be top dead center. On the earlier engines, there's a sight glass in the alternator cover and you can see the dot on the flywheel. And then you can sort of look through the hole and go, yeah, that's about there relative to the dot. And then when you're finished, you can just visually check that again. Whereas without that, I usually check the timing, then I will put the TDC stop back in and just quickly recheck my top dead center to make sure it hasn't moved at all. It always doesn't, but you just need to be sure. So the camshaft at the moment is set so that it was about 3 teeth counterclockwise from inlet valve closing at top dead center. So we'll see how close it is, but that should be about where it should be. Go around, the cam's moving, the valve's moving. You go around, should be starting to open soon. Starting to open about 55 degrees before top dead center. You come around, and at 1 millimeter lift, which is 1 rotation of the dial gauge there, we've got 28 degrees before top dead center. If you're going to do your cam timing, it always helps to have an idea of what numbers you expect. Sometimes people try and do this and they just don't understand what the numbers should be, and so they get very confused. So have an idea of what number you're expecting and where you're expecting it. So 28 degrees before top dead center. This is top dead center overlap. So 28 at top dead center, you can check your lift. So that's 2 mil lift. 3 at top dead center, we've got about 3.35 millimeters of lift. So if we write that down, 28 degrees inlet opening and 3.35 millimeters lift. The lift is just one of those things you can, once you get a feel for what you're doing, sometimes you can quickly set a cam or get a cam very close just by setting the lift at top dead center instead of going through all this. And so now we're going to turn it over until it starts closing. The engine should be about 60 or 70 degrees after bottom dead center when we have 1 millimeter valve lift from valve closed. So that was top dead center, that's bottom dead center. The number we're expecting should be about here somewhere. So you know when you get close to that number of what you're expecting to see happen. So we get the valves closing now. That's bottom dead center. And now coming back around, I would expect this 0 will be fully closed. Actually, we've gone too far. So that's valve fully closed. So I'll need to go back to the start. Coming up. It's 1 mil valve lift, 28 degrees. And if you look at the small dial, it's between the 14 and the 15. So you can use that to work out where you need to be if you like. Spin it around to max lift. Max lift is about there, which is 80 degrees before bottom dead center or about 100 degrees after top dead center. That's a max lift. The center line we're going to use is not related to the maximum lift. It's the center line is a calculated number. Doesn't actually tell you anything about the cam profile except where it opens and where it closes. So last time our closing is going to be about 50 degrees, I think. Yep, there it is. Little dial is between 14 and 15, 0, and we're at 46. So 28.46, which sounds to me a bit advanced. So the maths for it is 28, oops, don't know where 8 is, 28 plus 46 plus 180 equals 254 divided by 2. And then take away the first number, 28, 99. So that camshaft is at 99 degrees center line. So if that's the closing there and it opened here, the center point of that is over here. So it's 99 degrees after top dead center. So it is at about the maximum lift point. So if we want 108 degrees, we need to retard this cam 9 degrees from where it currently is. But what I'm going to do is I'll crack the pulley halves and we'll go full advance and full retard and just see how much potential movement there are in these pulleys, just out of curiosity. And there's every chance that at full retard, the exhaust valve will hit the piston, and at full advance, the inlet valve will hit the piston. So you need to be careful. And this is one reason why I like to check the cam timing, or at least set it with the tools, after I've undone the nuts on these adjustable pulleys, because I have seen these pulleys move between the halves when you're impact gunning a nut off. Sometimes these nuts are incredibly tight. You just rattle away at it with the impact gun, it can move the pulley halves. These are the pulley half nuts. And when you undo these, the pulley can rotate because there's slots in behind there. They were loose. I'll pull them out so they aren't terribly long. Let's see if we can see what's going on behind. There you go. So that's a faceplate. You can see there. And you can see these slots. One end is there, the other end is there. Slot there, a slot there, and a slot there. And we're close to the advanced end of the slot as the cam sits right now. And so these screws go through the outer, through the slot, and into the thread in the backing plate. And when it gets all clamped together, that's enough friction to hold them in position. It's amazing how little, like these are only 10 Newton meters on a 6mm bolt, but that's enough friction to hold that in position and drive the cams without it coming loose and the timing moving. It's quite amazing. So I'll put these bolts back in. Often you would Loctite these. These ones aren't Loctited, never have been Loctited, and I'll probably just leave them that way. It's up to you. Fairly easy to go nuts with Loctite sometime. I tend to not Loctite that many things in. I wouldn't lubricate them. Often I would lubricate this sort of stuff, but I wouldn't lubricate them. Maybe I should. If you lubricate them, you'll get a tighter torque for any given actual torque setting. I don't know. I think I would rather Loctite them because the Loctite will also lubricate the threads, but it will stop them coming undone. I might put some Loctite on them when I go back together. So if we just have them loose, we'll just put this pulley tool on to rotate the cam around. And if that's about where it was, that's advanced as far as the slots will go, and that's retarded as far as the slots will go. So that's the limit of the travel. So if we go all the way that way, which is all the way advanced, I won't turn the engine around again because I get sick of turning it around when it's on this stand. We'll see what the timing is now. Just be careful if you do move these because you might be putting a valve into a piston. So just be gentle. So at the fully advanced, we're opening at 36 degrees. So really only another 6 degrees advanced from where it was. So it was fairly close to one end of the slot. So that's 36. And it might even hit the piston after we go past top dead center. About 10, 15 degrees after top dead center is where it's tightest. But no, it's fine. Okay, so that's fully advanced. So we had 36, and if we now retard it fully, back to there. We'll see when our inlet valve's open. Now the problem now is that the exhaust valve might want to hit the piston, so that'll happen before you get to top dead center overlap. So coming up, dead center overlap now, just turn it gently in case it stops. Oops, forgot to look at when the valve was lifting. I'll go back. Okay, valve is starting to move now. 1 millimeter lift. is at 4 degrees. Okay, so these slots aren't that long. It was 36 and now it's 4. So that's only 24 degrees in the slots. Possibly it is the 18 tooth adjustable pulleys, like on a 900, 750 engine that started a 620, 800 that started in 2001. I'm sure they have maybe 65, 70 degrees slots, but these slots appear to be much shorter. And I guess realistically, you probably don't need that much. I have had engines, I've had a 999 that I tried to retard an exhaust cam and I couldn't get the last couple of degrees I wanted. So I ended up pulling the belt off, turning the pulley around one tooth, putting the belt back on and then moving the cam. And that way I got what I wanted. But these ones have surprisingly little potential movement in them, which is a bit strange. But what I might do now is, it's what I do sometimes. I know that, going by my numbers, if 28 degrees inlet opening at 1 mil lift is 99 degrees, I'm going to retard the cam 9, I need an inlet opening at 19 degrees. So if I set the crank to 19 degrees before top dead center, I can then loosen these pulleys off and turn the cam to give 1 millimeter lift, which you can't see, and that should be about right. And that's one way you can do it as well. So I'll set the engine to, go back, say 19. So that's 19 degrees. Now when you crack these nuts, it can move things a little bit. You'll see the gauge fluctuate. But have a look, 19, we need to advance the cam, which means we're rotating the cam anti-clockwise up to 1 millimeter of lift, which is there. Snip those up. And then I would go a full circle around and back again. And as we come back up, that opening starts about 45 this time. And 1 millimeter is there, which is 18. So I'm 1 degree off. So in the interest of being petty, I'll back those off a little bit and we want to advance it 1 degree. 1 degree is not much. If you see it move, you've probably gone too far. Okay. So I'll go around again to the start. Back up, 1 mil lift, and now we're at 20. So I went 2 degrees. Bugger. I'll go back to the valve closed, so back at top dead center. Depends how carried away you want to get. Chasing 1 degree can get very annoying, and I'm not actually checking the closing either, so maybe I should check the closing and do the maths again before I get too carried away in chasing 1 degree. $20, and now it's 2.6 millimeters lift at top dead center. We should be close to 55 degrees at inlet closing, 1 millimeter. 54. So we've got 20, 54. So 20, 54, which is 8 degrees difference. So that will be 107. Because both numbers have moved 8 degrees, which is what you sort of expect. 20 plus 54 plus 180, 254 divided by 2 minus 20 is 107. So I want 108. Am I going to waste time doing it? Maybe. It's one of those things sometimes where you just do it until you get really sick of it. As I say, if you can see it move, you've probably gone too far when it's 1 degree. You consider each tooth is 36 degrees. Where are we now? Back to 18. 2.4 at top dead center. $18.55. Maybe we could call it 1955. That's about right. Okay. I call that 1955, which is 108 and 2.4 millimeters at top dead center. And that means next cylinder, I could even set the horizontal at 2.4 millimeters lift at top dead center as an initial guess, and that might get me pretty close to where I want to be. The next thing to do is tighten these screws up. I was going to Loctite them, so pull each one out in turn. Put a bit of locky on it and whack it back in. I don't like the idea of these not being Loctited personally, I must say. I assumed they would have been Loctited when I pulled them out, frankly. It's pretty rare to see these without, or feel them. You can sort of feel when they're Loctited in, and usually they do feel like that. You don't need a lot of Loctite on them. But it does lubricate the threads as well when it goes back together, which is nice. And then 10 Newton meters on a 6mm bolt. There we go. And then once I've done that, I always check the timing again, because sometimes it does pull it a little bit. If anything, it will retard it a little bit. So we might have 109. We'll see. It's about 18. 2.4. And 56. I think we've got 109. 1856 is 109. And I guess I'll leave it there. Am I going to? Can't help myself. Sometimes you just need to leave things alone, but you get to the point where you just can't. Oops. Probably a good couple of degrees, I think. Let's see what happens. All the action you're missing from this side is what you've seen before. Oh, 19. Top dead center. About 2.5. $19.55. Wow. Let's look torque the bolts again. See if it moves. Hopefully it won't. You're not putting a lot of load on the belts when you do this, so I don't tighten these nuts with belts, or certainly not belts that I'm going to use in the engine when it's running, but I torque these up against the belts. So we'll go around again. 19, 2.5, 55 degrees. Beautiful. 108. Tick. Just so I know where we ended up. So that cylinder's timed. And you can see with my guess of 3 teeth from top dead center was about right. These have obviously moved when I've tightened them up. And that's just the way it goes. And that's why I like to check the cam timing after I've had these nuts off on the adjustable pulley engines, just because you're never quite sure if they've moved. And certainly if you had the tools, you could lock it all up with the tools and check it that way as well. I did check this engine in the previous videos, and I think with the locking tools in, it was pretty close to 108 degrees, which is good. So now I'll just do the horizontal, and then it's done. I did say I was going to recheck my top dead center, so I will do that before I call it done, just in case I've made a big mistake. Okay, back to this side. Top dead center firing because the valve's not moving. Put the piston stop back in. Turn the engine back gently until it stops. At 7. And 7. That's fine.